Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I request you all to please take your seats. I know it was a very interesting and a very insightful discussion and very well moderated by Pinky. And I know with a gathering like this, where everybody is working in some or other form of creating impact and doing good work, it's hard to resist to all the conversations. But we have another very great, lineup of speakers, which I have a great privilege of moderating. So I'm Aashish. I run a social impact consultancy called MASH. We do a lot of work on social impact communications, campaigns, and narrative building work, and a lot of partnerships. And it's been incredible to partner with BW Business World Group for the social second edition of the Social Impact Summit. On the panel today, we will be discussing about how social entrepreneurs are changing the face of urban India. But urban India is also, given the size of our country, is very diverse, right? So we'll and the challenge as a moderator is when you have such a eminent panel of speakers is how do you get the most of this conversation. So I have a few questions to ask them, and then of course I would also, if time allows, have the opportunity to ask few questions. So I won't spend too much time in terms of introducing our panelists, but I would rather start the first question like an opening remarks to introduce yourself, but keep it really brief and tell your journey in terms of the what inspired you to do what you do, the why behind of your work, and share with our audience. So let me start with Noopur first.
Thank you, Aashish. Thank you, BW. It's an honor to be here. So I come from a public policy place of work. Um, I always knew I wanted to be what we now call the development sector. When I was much younger, this nomenclature hadn't developed. So it was always, मेरे को change लाना है, charity नहीं करनी है. And nobody really understood that, what it meant. And I come from a Marwadi family, so it was either काम करो, पैसा कमाओ या charity करो. You can't do both. Then suddenly, Amartya Sen had the bottom of the pyramid sort of concept that came in, and I said, nahi, dekho, they are doing some impact, but they're like, but ultimately, to dhanda hi kar rahe hain. So then that sort of went down the drain, saying this is a conspiracy to sort of work with the development world and make money out of them. And over the years, sort of, that journey sort of strengthened more from a perspective that, I can do good and I still can make an impact, and somewhere money will happen. Worked in government in sort of international spaces, moved back to India from the US after multiple years of being there. Had a rude awakening in terms of the India that I knew and lived in urban came very different from the rural that I was getting exposed to. Had read it in the books and articles, but to see it really sort of transforms you. And then sort of we moved into this space where I started working with the government, both at the state and national level. And then COVID hit. And suddenly there was a week where we had over 40 deaths that we saw, with 2 degrees of separation. And it was that suddenly a agenda that was a retirement plan for an empty nester became a plan that what am I waiting for? And I'm lucky that I have a family and partners and friends who encouraged that and said that, it's life's too short and to be wasted on chasing dreams of financial. And I had the privilege of being able to do that. So here I am starting Changeinkk, which is really a foundation that runs, is building the ecosystem for people with neurodiversity and learning disabilities. We come from a perspective of enablement, where we're changing the discussion. And sorry for my language, but we're really going from the class ka gada to making them the next the genius of the world, if I can say it in that way. And that's the work we really do and are struggling.
Thank you, Noopur. I'll move on to Abhishek now, who's the founder and CEO of Muskaan Dreams. Abhishek, your journey, and I've seen you personally also, and it is an incredible work with the education space that you're doing. So yes, please walk us through about your work. Yeah.
Thank you, Aashish. I think honored to be here. My journey started a few years ago. I was teaching students while I was in college and pursuing computer science engineering. Teaching students on weekends actually turned up to be more like a full-time journey. When I passed out, graduated. Till the time I was not having any kind of idea, what exactly the social entrepreneurship looks like. But I think wo ho gaya. So I think 2017 we started our journey with the government schools working. The idea behind basically, we got placed and everyone got placed. My friends were teaching kids. The idea was, now who is going to teach kids basically, right? So I think that's where, as a student of computer science, the idea is basically that how do we bring technology to the government school classrooms? And that's where the journey started in 2017. So what exactly do we do at Muskaan Dreams? We are actually, bringing technology to the government school classrooms. The idea is basically that how do we empower teachers with technology? That's the one problem we are actually trying to solve. So we partnered with the government at multiple levels. It includes the state, it includes districts and blocks, and and what exactly do we do? Basically, we enable the government ecosystem through technology. We give a lot of resources. We give them a lot of advisory support, and we do also help them understand how exactly you can actually implement at scale. So these are the kind of few things which we exactly do at Muskaan Dreams to actually bringing technology to the government school classrooms to improve students' learning and experience inside the classrooms.
Thank you. Thank you, Abhishek. I'll move on to Satyam now, who's the founder of Arthan and Climate Asia. And they've been doing really good work in terms of building a talent pipeline for social sector organizations, also building a lot of within organization resilience, right? So in terms of how you see the entrepreneurship as a mindset, which is very critical, right? When you look at building the talent at impact organizations. So Satyam, a little bit about your work and also, on the theme, what are your opening thoughts?
Hi, glad to be here. So I was just reflecting, listening to them, thinking about when my journey started. So I think my journey started in 2005 with Kashmir earthquake. Sitting in Delhi University, hanging around with friends, someone came and said, "Would you want to go for relief work?" And I had no clue what relief work meant at that point in time. I pretty much thought it's an opportunity to go to Kashmir and explore Kashmir. Though I ended up being in northern Kashmir, Tandhar, doing relief work for earthquake, which sort of changed my life. So perspective, because before that I was pretty much geared up into, coming from a middle class household, thinking that you go and do your MBA and you take up a corporate job and you make money and you have a very consistent career trajectory. So I think happened by default, but 2005 was a era when I stumbled upon social sector, starting with relief work, moved on to doing social audits with John Rays, and spent 10 years working for different education not-for-profits, traveling around the country. Rather, one of the prominent education not-for-profit called Pratham, the founder asked me that, why do you need this job? And I said, I wanted to see India. And I think that's exactly what the organization gave me. I traveled to 20 states in India for work and learned a lot about different culture and education system and everything. In 2016, out of the blue, I was working in Bihar, working for a not-for-profit which was growing very fast. We raised significant capital at that point in time, $2 million or so. And the founder of the not-for-profit came to me and said, please help me hire 250 people. So I looked at the founder and I was like, where will I find these 250 people and how do we go about it? This is Bihar, Jharkhand, UP, Odisha. So I started scanning the ecosystem, saying who are the talent actors, who helps people find jobs in the not-for-profit space, how do you do it at scale, especially focusing on the rural and the mid-level talent, not just executive leadership, and came to the conclusion that there is no one. I mean, there is no organization you can go to which can actually address talent at a 360-degree level in the social sector. That led to the inception of Arthan. So right now we are India's largest talent player in the not-for-profit space. We have worked with 1,000 prominent not-for-profits addressing their talent needs. We also have a platform that connects people to jobs. While doing all of this, we also help organizations build their capability and capacity on how to attract talent. I think we are scratching the surface. Like no one talks about it, but in not-for-profit sector, more than 3 million people work in this space, which is more than IT. But since we are not treated as an industry, there isn't enough conversation around it. And I do think that many Arthans can be born and a lot more work can be done, especially when we start looking at rural India. So yeah, this is who am I and glad to be here.
Thank you, Satyam. And I think we have a very interesting mix of panel. There are social entrepreneurs, then there are people who working in building, scaling organizations. Then we have somebody who brings an investor's perspective and a corporate perspective. So Yeah, my only concern is the time. Over to Shefali and a little bit about Hearth. And again, we're working very closely with you, and you're investing in models which are sustainable, scalable, and impactful. So, what are your thoughts on the theme?
So thank you for having me here, Aashish, and Business World team. And it's really great to hear some amazing stories. There's lots to learn. So very quickly, my journey into what I'm doing right now is recent in comparison to the many years people have spent in the social sector. And I wouldn't say I think I'm a social capitalist. That's how I describe myself. I spent about 27 of the 30 years I've been in the professional world working for large capitalist organizations, only looking at growth from a point of view of not regenerative, but perhaps the opposite, which is degenerative, which is not good for the planet, not good for people. But it's not been always that way, but it's been a combination of working for from everything from junk foods to good things like health insurance and mobile devices. My recent journey. So what Hearth Ventures does, to answer your specific question, is we invest. We are at risk, which means we invest equity capital, not grants and not foundations or donations, in enterprises which are focused on India's creative and cultural sector. And the third C is the circular economy. And what we mean by this is India's craft, capabilities are immense. We've got 3,000 plus craft forms. We've got, the estimates range from 6 million to 200 million artisans. 56% of these are women in rural areas, which are a great source of driving rural livelihood. And that has been diminishing over the decades. Every year we lose a lot of our artisans and craftspeople to urban migration. Doing jobs which are not necessarily making them happy, living in squalor, in slums, getting away from the communities they grew up in, and doing jobs which actually are not respecting the skill sets that they come from. So the thesis that we had was, we started with craft, and then we started researching the sector sometime in 2020, me and my partners, and we came to the conclusion that there are two aspects here. One is there's a huge global demand for ethical, purposeful products. The responsible consumption and production, which is one of the SDG goals, is actually a real thing for consumers. It's a consumer trend across the world. Perhaps it'll pick up on trend in India also. On the other hand, we have a large craft ecosystem here, which can be connected through entrepreneurs. So our aim was, can we create an entrepreneurial ecosystem, get the best talented entrepreneurs to be the bridge between the producers and the markets. And they solve for it with technology, with design, and with marketing. And that's how Hearth Ventures was born. So we are a recent fund. We've currently invested proprietary capital over the last 2 years, across 5 enterprises. And these are very diverse enterprises, from a Kadam Heart, which is a basketry. Kadam started as a NGO, as a not-for-profit. And they started a for-profit arm because they wanted to give artisans sustainable livelihood, and we've invested in the for-profit arm. We've invested in a circular fashion company and a few others. Because of time, I will move on.
Sure. So. Thank you, Shefali. I think it's very interesting to see how, as a social entrepreneur, sometimes it's always seen as these are only not-for-profit models, but then there is a lot of interesting models, blended models, like what Shefali just mentioned, where we have a for-profit, a not-for-profit arm, which is again very purpose-aligned, but just allows you to create more scale there, right? So we'll come back to that. I'll go to Jayant now, who's the global CEO of Magic Bus Foundation. And Jayant, your journey and your work at Magic Bus.
So I come from the corporate world. I'm probably the oldest over here, but I'm the youngest kid on the block because I just spent 7 years in the sector. So don't have any fantastic stories like all of you, amazing work that you're doing. So I used to run Motorola and a few other MNCs for South Asia, etc. before I actually came to the sector. I came to the sector because I thought that, whatever we've done on the other side in terms of building large businesses, if I could bring that scale and the understanding of technology to the sector. So I joined with that. I've never thought of it as kind of giving back, because I feel jo deta hai wo haath hamesha upar hota hai. So I was look at it as kind of learning. So I've learned a lot, and probably a much better person now over here. I've learned also, how to work with really large teams. So let me just talk a little bit about Magic Bus, what we do. See, we are today one of the largest NGOs in the country today, one of the largest implementation organizations. We work on education and livelihood or skilling. We have 2 programs, the adolescents. So we are basically helping children transition from childhood to livelihood. We do this providing life skills. So teaching children or adolescents, which is the pre-puberty when maximum dropout happens, especially for girls, with more focus on the gender. We help them basically transition through life, school, and work. And today, in fact, we work across the country. We are in 9 countries. Our largest program is in India today. In fact, as we speak, we are actually working with around 9 state governments, 6 already confirmed, where we are penetrating all school systems. So outreach is somewhere around 50 to 80 lakhs. That is what, in terms of adolescent. And on the livelihood side, we've again become one of the larger players with 100,000 odd people getting skilled last year, and almost 85-90% getting good sustainable jobs at the entry level grey collared. So when I say sustainable, I mean jobs with growth. So that is what we do. And I think one of the best things which has happened is that the fact that the organization actually believes in a lot of technology. So in fact, I'm hearing that almost everybody over here has something common with technology. And you mentioned that 250 people hiring. So the way we are scaling, we are hiring almost 250 to 300 people every month. And that's a huge challenge for the team within. We also, I think in a short time, we've grown almost four times what we were in the last 6 years that, as an organization. And we are really massively scaling, again, using technology, innovation, etc. So that's been my journey.
Thank you, Jayant. I'll quickly come to now Nitin and get his perspective on his work at Resurgent and your thoughts on the theme, Nitin.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Aashish. I'm probably the odd one here because I don't really come from the entrepreneurial point of view. But I will tell you how we are connected to the ecosystem. So, I'm coming from the investment banking background, and we kind of work with a lot of startups and growing companies who are looking to raise equity capital. Like I think she also mentioned that she's looking at investing certain equity capital in the certain entrepreneurship, right? So we particularly, understand a lot of stories and a lot of entrepreneurs who are, kind of getting into new venture and making certain impact on the ground, right? Now, our perspective to understand that venture is that, how sustainable it can be and what kind of impact or certain transformation that it can bring on the ground, right? It cannot really happen overnight or in not short of time, but it will take definitely 2-3 years or even beyond that. But the entrepreneur should carry that vision and what are the products, services, or solution that has been designed to make that impact on the ground, right? So I'm not really kind of say that I have experience on the ground, but particularly with my interaction with a lot of entrepreneurs who want to make that impact on the ground, I can say that it requires a really on-ground effort, right? So it cannot be done like a corporate which open a couple of offices and build up a team and provide technology solution. The entrepreneur has to focus towards building a network in the rural areas, in the remote areas, and engage with people who are actually could be benefit through that, or maybe can expect certain change in their life, maybe in not a quick span of time, but in a longer run. But if you can carry that engagement and kind of understand the challenges and design your product and solution accordingly, and then again take the beat back. So that ultimately creates a entrepreneur or the organization which can really kind of transform the ecosystem and can bring a positive impact. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Nitin. So I'll get started with the first thing. India's currently, we're just very close to the G20 summit, and throughout the year we have had so many events, so many discussions on the thematic, right? And India is now also growing among G20 nations, very fast growing economy. And one of the biggest assets we have is our young people, right? So when we talk about educating them, when we talk about building this mindset, which is entrepreneurial, which is change makers mindset, which is looking at not problems as problems, but as an opportunity to create something which is, which is, sustainable and scalable. So my question to Jain, especially the ones who are working, especially with students largely, that how can we create this mindset where social entrepreneurship in particular is seen as mainstream? So I'll start with Jain, and then I'll come to Noopur and Abhishek, and any panelist who you feel you would add that. Yeah, because I've also split questions based on different expertise that each one of you bring. But please feel free to add wherever you feel the need. So Jain, to start with you. Yeah.
So firstly, I'll share a personal experience actually, So after my Motorola days, actually I did 2 startups. I did a social venture, which was basically not for profit, which was into healthcare, providing affordable healthcare using technology to the marginalized communities. I did it for 1.5 years. I actually tried to roll it out, but the kind of effort in terms of money, resources, and time that I had spent, I just couldn't see the sustainability around it. And I did go to, a couple of, angel investors, etc., and probably they didn't like the idea or whatever it was. It was very difficult to sustain it, so I had to shut that down. On the other hand, I started another one, which was a transport aggregation, which was again technology-based, and it did amazingly well. And then within a short time, there were people who were coming and wanting to take stake and give us money. So what I want to tell you is that you see the overall ecosystem. I think it is changing, and I think people like you coming in, providing the capital, and there's good projects have capital chasing them now. But it was a very difficult environment. With my kind of a background, everything coming from corporate, running businesses, I thought it would have been very easy for somebody to come and fund me. But at that point in time, nobody knew me in that sector, and it was very difficult. So I think, it's difficult how to kind of, get funding. So I think that's the biggest problem for, I think, social entrepreneurs, although it is changing. See, what we do at Magic Versus, we work actually in the communities. We work across, 24 different states in the country, and we work with, when we employ people also, we get people from the community to work for us. And these people actually, they get inspired, they become kind of people start looking up to them, they call them Bhaiya and Didi over there. And these people start, at some point in time, once they've been associated, they go back, they start giving back to that particular society. In fact, a really wonderful example is, we saw LSE. Now, see, we are into life skills, that's our core. So we thought, one of my colleagues, when they showed that this was life skills education. So she asked that person, "Tumne LSE ka kya khola hai?" So he says, "Learning to speak English." So he had started those classes over there. So I think, this is how entrepreneurship spawns, The people who kind of, started with their organization have become large. Dream a Dream. Vishal Talreja used to work for Magic Bus, and he started Dream a Dream, which is, I think, there's Oscar Foundation. So a lot of people keep getting inspired. But I think, see, the biggest thing is, it's working with, mentors, ideating. I think schools have started doing it. IB schools have a cash program. They're getting children exposed. So I think it's the ideation, mentorship, also working with, other people who can kind of, bring exposure to these problems. So I think those are the things which are really required to kind of bring a change.
Thank you, Jayant. Abhishek, quick thoughts from you in terms of your experience. How can this mindset change can be done at a more scale?
So I think there are 2 things. One is social, and then the entrepreneurship. I believe that hum sabke andar social to hai. Everyone wants to do something good end of the day, right? But the entrepreneurship is missing, right? So, a few years ago, I was dating a girl. And the first question she asked, after meeting, having conversation that, okay, what do you do? So I said, okay, I run a non-profit organization and we work for so-and-so. Then she said, that's great. But what do you do? What do you do for a living? Yeah. I think that's a very, frequent question that we as a social entrepreneur receive every day, every single day. And I'm not talking about the 0.1%, population of the India, but I'm talking about the 99.9% population of India. It doesn't have idea. They don't take social entrepreneurs seriously, right? They don't think, social entrepreneurs actually have a serious role to play in the contribution of the nation development, right? So I think these are some of the concerns. I think पहले तो इनको address करना ज़रूरी है. So for, personally, apart from my organization, I'm personally on a mission to actually promote social entrepreneurship across the youth, the young people, those who are coming out of the colleges, because they are the best generation, they are the innovators, they are the tech-savvy people, and they can actually solve a lot of stuff, by it's just that they are not even aware, what exactly the social entrepreneurship is and how they can actually become and pursue. Because we can see that, every single day, that a lot of startups and innovations are actually coming to the market. But when it comes to social innovation, the pie is small, very small actually. And in India, we need more social entrepreneurs to actually solve the problem at massive scale. So I think what we need to do is actually, the one is basically we can spread word around is, हमारा जो social sector है ये बहुत छोटा है अभी भी basically, right? If we compare to the for-profit world. So I think पहले तो ये है that it is important to actually spread the word and make the future generation aware that okay, this is the world, it's actually exist, right? So that people start taking you seriously. अभी वो नहीं होता है basically, if we compare to the for-profit world. So I think वो gap जब तक fulfill नहीं होगा तब तक ये करना थोड़ा मुश्किल है.
Got it. Noopur, very quickly, your thoughts, and also from a perspective of a educator, a parent, also, when you're looking at building career. One part, of course, you work with students, right, children in your communities, but also a perspective where you can share a role of educator and parent also. When you look at mindset shift.
I think the social sector requires a sense of purpose. Anybody who comes here has to have a sense of purpose in the sector that they're working and feel a burden of improving that sector. But purpose and passion don't pay bills ultimately. So if you're making career choices, those career choices come from a place of, okay, do I feel passionately about it? Great. But then will it pay my bills, or will it give me career growth? And then will it bring me respect? And I think those are the 3-4 things that matter when any parent, any individual makes choices, whether they're starting their career or moving ahead. Unfortunately, this sector is tainted in the sense that, you say, I work in the social sector, I work in NGO, you're expecting somebody jhola karke, they're going to do activism. Ya koi gareeb aadmi ko help kar raha hai. Nobody thinks of that, oh, I'm incubating the next, person, and the next Olympic star may come out of this program, right? That's not social sector in terms of a vision. And I think the expectation management of bill payment, a lot of it is privilege. Like, I came into this because I had the privilege of choice. It was okay that my income would be 20% less because I had a savings, but even at the age that I chose to become an entrepreneur, it was a big decision. It impacted my children's college career. It impacted, how work at home would happen. And that's not because, I come from a background that my income was dependent. It's still a choice. So how do you make this purpose-driven but financially lucrative as a sector where there's that fine line between greed and sustenance and comfort, not even sustenance, but comfort. We expect people in this sector to sustain and not excel. And I think when those things as a sector we figure out, and I think some of the foundations are now getting better at paying salaries, they're benchmark at industry standards, work-life balance we were discussing earlier comes into place, career pathways become clearer, right? Like that, I'm going, what if this organization shuts down? Who's going to give me a naukri next? But kara kya maine life mein? Those kind of questions. Those things will sort of help more people get into the sector.
Thank you. Thank you, Noopur. And I think you touched upon some very interesting points in that how it's also a privilege. But can we also make it so mainstream where the idea is not just seen that, hey, I want to be, settled somewhere in life before I plunge, right? Versus you start at day one, right? So I'll come to somebody talked about intrapreneurship. I think we talked about how within large organizations, especially corporates, right? The commercial sector, for-profit sector is so large. There's also so much great work. We had a panel in the morning about CSR, right? But intrapreneurship, social intrapreneurship, where, individual leaders who are coming up and looking at problems that can be solved, right? So I want to take a little understanding from some of you who've worked, especially Satyam, given you're working so much with the whole talent pool right now. And then maybe we'll take some thoughts from Nitin and Jayant here. And anybody, feel free given you want to add something to this point, right?
Yeah, I was thinking you should ask Jayant because how Matthew started Magic Bus and Jayant coming and leading it is an example of entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. Right.
So I guess in the sector, social sector produces a lot of leaders because one of the beauty of this sector is it's flat. Now people criticize it a lot, saying that's the reason why you don't grow because a lot of people are actually at the same level, and there isn't demarcation of like who does what. And but at the same time, I think the power of like solving for a problem as a team, as a collective, is unique. And that's what I think the social sector brings to the table when it comes to partnering with corporates or partnering with any kind of institutions, because you are working in a very lack of resources kind of environment with a very small team, and you have a very ambitious goal. And then you realize that, you have this is exactly what startup entrepreneurship is. But when you put it in the social sector, it becomes more and more challenging because someone will come to you and say, design an e-commerce platform. We are paying you for the platform, but we are not paying you for the customer acquisition.
Right.
Now, in a for-profit world, an investor will say you put in more money in customer acquisition and less money in the creation of a platform. In a not-for-profit space, someone will say, oh, platform ban gaya na, rest we'll figure out like how the users will come and how they will use it. So I think there is clearly a challenge when it comes to how this sector looks at resources and how people look at grant making. I mean, particularly thanks to CSR, there is 14,000 crore on an average coming in, but it's coming in a very reactive manner. Every year the money comes and the money goes. You don't really sustain your partners, nor you sustain your program. So it becomes difficult for entrepreneurs to actually sustain the work. While all the social sector leaders, I mean, if I talk about my experience, I was part of a small team at Pratham in 2007, and all of us ended up starting something of our own.
Oh, wow.
That entire small team. So ID Insight was born, Arthan born. I mean, enough examples of like, how many, there's something called Mesa School now going live. So I started thinking of Pratham as like an incubation ground of young talent.
Even Teach for India, a lot
Even
of
Teach for India.
TFX,
for India.
yeah.
So social sector has that capacity. I think we need to start looking at it differently. And Abhishek was talking about it in terms of it needs to be treated as an industry. It needs to be treated as something, social enterprises, just for this audience, we had 300 plus equity investments in 2021 worth $6 billion. It's not small amount of money. We have grant capital of $100 billion. It's not small amount of money. I'm not even getting into an international foundation. What we don't have is enough number of people coming in and starting. Enough number of people willing to take that risk. Enough number of parents who are willing to support their children and taking a career in the social sector. Because we still think becoming a doctor, engineer, and lawyer is the best possible pathways from a sense of security lens. But this generation, we are sitting in 2023, a lot of people who are entering the world of work now, their parents have done the basic financial security, if I talk about it. Now it's a time you can take any form of risk. We have enough incubation program, enough exposure. India is on the forefront of change. Now Indian entrepreneurs actually talk about working in multiple countries, something which was not the case when even I started my career. When now I think India is looked at as a ground for problem solving. People say if you can solve this in India, you can solve this in 5 other Asian countries. True. So I guess a lot exists. We need to activate it, become clear about it, and build an entire robust ecosystem so that people treat this sector differently.
Yeah, Jayant.
I'll just add to what I think Satyam said. See, what's really happening is that there's a lot of technology advancement which is happening. And see, the changes that we are seeing today are actually, far more, the cycles are becoming much, much shorter, right? This gives us an opportunity to kind of, develop things, do new things much, much more faster, but it's also a challenge. And when you look at it, see, most of the organizations, you talk about predictive AI, which is coming now, right? We are talking about, so the companies which have brought this is obviously with a profit motive, and it is good. I'm saying it is good. Everything is good and bad, right? So it has good and bad. But when you look at this predictive AI, it's all for profit, right? To understand, okay, how is he thinking? How am I thinking? How can I actually monetize further? But there's very little being done on the social sector side as to what is it that you can do with this kind of predictive AI, right? And I think it's for organizations like us to really start capitalizing and using technology for good, right? And that's something that we've tried to kind of evangelize or get on. So I actually forced so we have a team of around 30 odd senior lead directors and above, right? So I actually started asking them, okay, how are you going to use AI in your respective functions? So I literally see the whole thing is that the idea should be germinated and then only the idea should be sown and then only it kind of germinates, right? So the idea was to kind of get there. So that's what we started actually also kind of looking at, and I think it is a game changer technology today in whatever.
Shefali, yeah, you want to comment?
Yeah, I just want to add again to the conversation because there's a lot of stimulating points that came out. So there's one macro trend we are seeing. We're seeing this whole crisis of consciousness, the great resignation a few years ago globally. And of course, even in India, we saw a lot of people working in the mainstream corporate world they were disillusioned. Of course, post-COVID got over, they had to get back. But many of them actually decided to be very purpose-led in their careers and what they were doing. So a lot of the social enterprises born from outside the sector have that whole mindset of being both profit and purpose-led. And that, I think, is a great opportunity because you want to make the enterprise self-sustaining. You don't want to always be dependent on donations. And you want to generate enough cash to keep sustaining and keep driving social impact. So, and the second macro trend is we've just got to a level over the last few years where entrepreneurship itself is accepted in India as a mainstream career. So I guess social entrepreneurship is further down the line, so just 2 points.
Yeah, but things are changing. They're changing too fast. Noopur, and I think, Nitin, you want to add something, right?
So
Yeah.
I also want to bring in the perspective that the private sector brings in a lot of this social entrepreneurship opportunities. The Tata Group is actually a great example.
True. Yeah.
So today, one of the country's largest online platforms for artisans is actually born out of one of the Tata companies as an internal entrepreneurial sort of effort that came in, where the leadership then came and said, okay, why don't you take a sabbatical, sort of go experiment, we'll give you some CSR funding. And today it's grown into such a large platform. And I think more and more we are seeing, you can see the global stack with Step, they're doing a lot of that.
Right.
The private sector is coming in a very different expertise to encourage and support social entrepreneurs. And we don't leverage that enough because the mindset is we will use them only for their money instead of getting that training and sort of figuring it out. And I think that's a ground that if we sort of keep pushing, probably some of that will happen. We're changing, we are doing some of that, where we're pushing the burden of social impact on the corporate sector and saying, look, this is not my business to do, this has to be in your daily thinking to happen, right, for it to be sustainable. So I think that could also sort of shift certain things.
Yeah, so we need a more ecosystem coming together and everybody collaborating on that. Yes, Nitin.
Yeah, so, with my interaction with, a lot of young entrepreneurs, what I've, kind of noticed is that when we particularly talk about social entrepreneurship, it starts with a very small thought. Somebody is, kind of doing certain work in his neighborhood only, right? And if they feel that, okay, the product or the service or certain initiative that they're doing is actually benefiting some people, and that can be taken to a larger scale. So that's how they, kind of open different within the city, then, onboard a lot of partners. And then when they become, competent about the fitment, then I think the role of technology becomes more important because you want to kind of reach out to different cities, different regions, and different kind of people. And when you get the support of technology, then your reachability is quite, extended, and ultimately, then you are able to feel that impact or that change on the ground, right? So one aspect is definitely the vision and the larger, kind of change in the ecosystem. It should come from the founder, but they, at the same time, there has to be a step-by-step approach where you feel that, okay, whatever level effort or the product or solution that you're providing is actually making some change on the ground.
Absolutely.
Right?
And measuring that, right?
Yeah,
Like it's
measuring
important,
that,
yeah.
If somebody is coming from the technology background, maybe, they can feel that, okay, things can be changed in the quicker span of time, or the effect of that can be reflected in the, shorter time. But ultimately, if you are able to maintain that stickiness,
right,
that's actually, important, because a lot of people are using apps and they are kind of engaging with a lot of entrepreneurs. But ultimately, they use it for a couple of times and then they kind of, goes off the hook, right? So you have to kind of think that, okay, your solution is really relevant to the ultimate client or the customer, so that you can build upon it and, kind of adjust accordingly and, kind of really make that change on the ground.
Got it.
Yeah.
One important question, of course, when you talk about social entrepreneurship, and in some form you've all touched upon it, but I'll just have one round, and given the time is really running short, and then we can have one or two questions from the audience as well, is about investments, and it's all about fundraising, right? When we're talking about encouraging and really boosting social entrepreneurship in India, I wanted to understand from all of you, just quick thoughts in terms of, and I'm sure there are people in audience as well who are social entrepreneurs themselves or working in some form of capacity with the entrepreneurs, right? There are different models that are emerging, right? There are pure equity models Shefali spoke about, there are grants, there are blended finance, and so on and so forth, right? So how do you see like the role of, like how do you see the whole investment, push that's happening to boost social entrepreneurship in the country? And what are some interesting trends that are emerging, right? So opportunities and the challenges when you see, right? So anybody you would like to start, or maybe Shefali, you want to begin, and then we can go to each of the panelists.
So some of the investment trends we are seeing from our point of view is we are seeing a whole ecosystem developing, right? In for-profit social enterprises.
Right.
We are seeing angel investors, we are seeing incubators and accelerators. For example, CI.co is doing a lot of good work. The Startup Oasis, NICE, which is Network of Indian Cultural Enterprises, Upaya Social Ventures, and there's a whole long list of incubators and accelerators coming through, at least in our ecosystem. And then there are venture funds like us, which ideally should be helping these organizations drive for growth capital with mentoring. So we're just seeing a complete ecosystem developing from our point of view. So I'll
It's
stop at
positive
that.
when you see there's a good work.
And by the way, a lot of this has been, there have been a lot of COVID babies.
Okay.
Lots and lots of new initiatives around that time because the whole world woke up, right? And I think India really woke up. So, with the migration that we saw, the 100 million number that's touted.
Even collaborative philanthropy, apart from equity, that's also
That's
happened
right.
a lot after COVID. That's the emerging trend. Anybody else, Jayant, Satyam, who you want to come in?
See, I think Shefali is absolutely right. See, there's a lot of money which is coming into the sector. There's a lot of money which is chasing good projects, but there are very few good projects. Also, it's extremely important, as a social entrepreneur or a social enterprise, you have to build credibility. That's very. So I would break this into two. There are the smaller ones who just started off. It's going to be very challenging for them because they have to go sell their ideas, and I'm sure people like you are coming and kind of encouraging them. But they're the larger ones. If they have a good idea, they find it relatively easy. Again, from personal example, we've been trying to build a AI-led future skilling model where we're saying unit economic cost needs to come down. We can reach more people across the country, blended model, online, offline, both, etc. So I think 5 years back, I was looking for money for that. I doubt there would have been too much of money. We recently got around $5.1 million for that platform. So I think this for good project.
And what has really worked in your case? Like, is it the great work done over the years, or is it the network that has been built? Because I'm sure in the audience they want to know success stories like Magic Bus. What has really worked in your case?
See, I think it's a combination of everything. You can't say. So I think there's been a lot of great work which has happened.
Okay.
But I think people want to see results. They also want to see if you're saying something, will you actually produce or provide those outcomes?
Right.
So I think more and more you start proving that when you're saying something that you will do it, you execute it well, you strategize well. Also, and then obviously you start growing your connections.
And communicate it well as well.
Communicate, obviously. So with outcomes you have to.
And any new models that you've seen in the last few years?
I think somebody alluded. So one is there's development impact one. So
DIBs,
India started actually. I think there are a couple of us who got that. We got the first development impact bond on the livelihood side, right?
Yeah.
Again, very performance driven. So if you don't perform, you don't get your money. So now very few social entrepreneurs would have the appetite to go for it.
Absolutely.
But because if you're sure about your delivery, your outcomes, then you will take that bet, right?
Right.
So again, I think.
Educate Girls also has raised. That's a very interesting model. Any other panels you want to touch? I think Noopur, Satyam. Okay, let's hear from Noopur first, and then we'll come to Satyam.
I think there are a lot of opportunities to raise funds, but the alignment of the timelines for return on investment versus return on social investment are often not aligned.
True, yeah.
How do you sort of measure that and sort of align that is the key to your success? Because it's very easy to say, I will run a campaign to do mindset shift and say I had like 33 million people who reached out and, I have all these analytics and I prove it and I have a few sort of people with verified handles who will retweet and suddenly it's like, oh, you made a lot of noise. But did that transform a life, right? Like, how do you put that money behind the social change for long enough for the social change to show up? And I think when we can crack that, I think the outcome bonds sort of do some of it, but the challenge is again, like, I want the project to be done in 2 years versus the change, actually the girl will graduate from school only in 10 years and sort of those kind of questions come in that we need to work together to sort of start financing it. So CSR, collaborative philanthropy becomes the bridge that we're seeing. So for example, the Convergence Foundation incubates us. That's a great place because they're providing us all the support that an entrepreneur will get with the patience that a social enterprise requires to discover the solution which is right on the field. And I wish there were more of those kind of solutions.
I would just like to add that I think there's a lot of money for privilege. The language you speak, the college you go to, the circuits you hang around with, in every form of capital. So whether it's grant capital, equity investment, blended finance, I'm not getting into dips and other forms of structures because that comes at a different level of maturity. I don't personally see a lot changing for early stage social entrepreneurs. So anyone, if I say I have a problem statement, I go out in the market and say, give me 50 lakh rupees. There's very limited amount of appetite for something like that. That's one. B, every form of entrepreneurship in India is still largely a very big cities and metropolitan crowd, which we talk about. And then I think of the workforce in India, some 150 million people working in white collar workforce, you define India because of them. Everyone is a social entrepreneur or everyone is an entrepreneur because they have to make a living out of their, like anything they do, right? So every time you travel around India, some 1.25 billion people are actually working, creating something out of nothing without any collateral from any kind of bank or a cooperative. So everyone is a social entrepreneur in some manner. It's just what we praise and what we look at and what kind of things we talk about becomes very much like at the top. So I think it would be great if we stop focusing on the top 5% or top 1% of the country and start looking at the remaining parts of the country. And same goes for all forms of entrepreneurship. We don't talk about entrepreneurs in Northeast India. We don't talk about entrepreneurs in Kashmir or any other part of the country. So I think it's time now that we start looking at India, which is beyond big cities and metropolitan and relationships. There's a lot of brand equity in social entrepreneurship. People know that's probably whoever has been forever. You become a brand and the money starts flowing. And people stop questioning you after a certain point of time because you are a big enough brand and people trust you enough. But that does not mean that your impact is deeper. There's someone who might be working in a rural Champaran doing better work than you, but they don't have access to any form of capital. So I would just like to say this India as a country is full of social entrepreneurs, and that's 90% of our population. So we have to just change the mindset, change the argument, and start thinking of capital that can be taken beyond cities like we sit in and all of us come from.
Very important point raised. Thanks, Satyam. I think the screen shows time's up, but I'll take one final comment from Abhishek. And if, I don't know, organizers allow us, maybe one question from audience, but if not, maybe we can, of course, connect with this wonderful panel in our next tea break or whenever there's opportunities available. But yeah, Abhishek.
Thank you, Aashish. I think,
Your mic's not working, I guess.
just adding to what Satyam and I think Noopur mentioned, basically, I think if you look at the numbers, the capital which is going towards the growth and scale to the organization is actually higher. And if you look at the risk capital, or I would say the innovation, I think which is very, very low in terms of numbers. So I think the funders point from the funders perspective and from their side, I think it is important to actually I don't know how, but if we can create more risk capital, because that is what is required for the new generation to actually to actually come up with this new solutions and need sort of investment. That's how the for-profit world, the for-profit entrepreneurs works. Basically, they raise seed amount basically in their initial stage, right? I think same is required in case of social entrepreneurship as well. And I have a strong faith and hope. I think hoga future mein kabhi to.
Great. It's a great way to leave this panel with a hope, and I'd like to thank all our panelists and thank BW Business World for giving us this platform. It's at a very timely, just before the G20 summit, and India is positioned to be not only a global leader in just so many ways, but definitely become the world leader in when it comes to social impact capital of the world as well. So thank you so much, and let's carry on these conversations further. Thanks.